This is Tech Scene Talks on Tour, the podcast about enterprise technology that brings you IT insights and analyses from events all around the globe. We cover everything, everywhere. Visit techzine.eu for more information, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast.
Welcome to this new episode of Tech Scene Talks on Tour. I'm Sander, and I'm at Splunk.conf 24, and I'm here with James Hodge. He's the Chief Strategic Advisor for Splunk EMEA. Did I say that right?
You did.
Very good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Nice of you to make some time. I hear a lot from Splunk about the SOC of the future. And a lot of things that have been announced this week are basically geared towards that SOC of the future. But maybe let's just take a step back. Right? What is a SOC in 2024 again?
I think a SOC in 2024 is a very complicated place. We released this report, State of Security, last week, the cost of downtime this week. And I think the thing that really struck me, I think in the statistics, it was $20 million worth of cost of downtime per company in the global 2000s average. And some of the highest aspects of that really showed that SLA reporting and regulatory risk were some of the biggest things that came out of that as the total cost and where they were struggling. Mm-hmm. And in the state of security, the thing that I made me almost feel sorry for anyone that works in the SOC was a lot of people that sit inside of security operations were considering leaving the industry because of the increased pressure on regulatory environments, compliance, and then also making sure you don't get breached and those type of things. So I think what is a SOC 24? It's a pressure cooker of dealing with complexity and this promise of like where technology is going and what it can do. So it's a difficult place to be.
Because there are already so few people that actually do security, to put it that way. And if they start leaving, then who's going to take over?
Well, it's a niche skill set because I'm trying to find I'm not a CISO, but someone that works in a SOC. You're trying to find someone that understands technology, but really you need someone that understands infrastructure, networking, applications, connectivity, everything in between, plus security, plus a bit of psychology, plus how to do runbooks, plus a bit of compliance. You keep adding on to that list, and that's you're almost looking for unicorns nowadays.
So when we talk about the SOC of the future, we really need that, right? If I hear you correctly.
Yeah, I think a couple of things in the SOC of the future is, I think this is different coming from, I've worked for vendors a long time, and normally when we talk about things, we'll put ourselves in the center of the universe for everything, and everyone sits around us, and that's not really true. We are a piece of the puzzle to go and help with that digital resilience picture, security being important. And what I think SOC of the future really means, what we believe is a data-informed and data-led approach to security operations, and the recognition that data is going to be scattered everywhere, and the analysts shouldn't have to worry where the data is. They think about what's the analytical task in hand. Yeah. Ultimately, and the promise of AI, of where we think it's going to go, is I kind of like using a phone. I don't care how it works. I have a task in mind. I don't think of a phone as a barrier or a tool I need to learn. I just do.
Do you see the boundaries of the SOC being moved as well? Because obviously this week at .conf was the pipeline builders that were announced.
And part of our data management experience.
Which basically does stuff to data on the edge before you actually ingest it into your SOC. Does that mean that we're moving towards sort of a distributed SOC?
Well, I think there's two things that are really changing in security. One is where we go and apply analytics. Think of businesses nowadays. It's super easy to become a multinational business with the invention of cloud computing. If I do anything with kind of real devices, I've got kind of edge. I have lots of connectivity inside of it. So I don't want to backhaul that data all the time, maybe to central SOC. I also might be working with highly regulated environments and have constraints. So I think we believe in a distributed environment will remain, hybrid and complexity. I think the other key part about it is security operations actually and needs to work really well with IT operations.
I mean, they should have done that a long time ago.
But you and I were talking before we started this. We've been talking about this in industry for a long time. But I think as digital is your business now, the imperative for security operations to be a revenue enabler is more than ever before. I think we have to accept risk, And I'm a massive fan to rethink this, even to the point where KPIs are shared between IT operations and security. So I think both should own, breach detection, keep the business secure, and both should own a number on generating revenue.
Yeah.
And because I think that then gets harmonization.
Yeah, on paper that looks great, right?
On paper,
and it has looked great for about, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been talking with people and with vendors and with customers of vendors about bridging gaps between what have you, and at the end of the day, it didn't really happen. Why will it happen this time then?
So I think one of the reasons it doesn't happen is because you have multiple different types of tools within inside of your environment. One tool may spit out one answer, one tool might spit out another answer. It becomes very difficult to collaborate. So I'm going to be a bit geeky here.
Yeah.
But what you really want is a tool putting out the answer. Let's say it's 42, and then kind of work back to kind of the question. But what we're really saying is you may sit and work in IT operations, I may sit in security operations. The kind of machine has said something doesn't look right here. Now you and I can collaborate to say what type of incident to the business is. Is it security? Is it IT? And actually we now have a common way of looking for it. And I think that's the advantage of taking a data-orientated approach, is data is a common language and how you see things differently.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really happened in the industry much. They've all been isolated toolings, different types of answers, coming to different conclusions with the same data. Yeah. So I think that's a big step change in the industry.
So let's use a security term. So the indicators.
Oh, yes.
The indicators are there that we are actually moving in the right direction.
I think massively. I'm going to be slightly biased because,
obviously.
Here, but I think
I wouldn't expect anything else.
No, I think else. As a technologist, a few weeks ago, I was super excited because I sat at the launch of Cisco Hypershield. And
I cover that as well.
It kernel level monitoring, and it was very security orientated at launch. But for me, what they're doing with eBPF and iSurveillance was, from an IT monitoring point of view, really exciting. Because I think for the first time ever, we've got a new category, especially what they're doing with eBPF, to be able to go and observe everything that's happening within inside of your infrastructure. Because at the kernel level, you can do it at the switch, you can do it at the software layer. Because now I can go and see everything that's happening, and I can now decide how do I want to go and look at that. And so ignoring I work for Splunk Cisco, it is, I think in the industry, and we'll see other people follow this and make utilization of it, we're starting to get to the point where it's becoming possible to observe everything with technology. So I think that opens up possibilities. That's what I'm excited about. Yeah,
and if you now that you mentioned it like this, there is also, the acquisition and the integration makes more sense as well, right? Because if you want to have IT people talk to security people, there are lots of IT people working with Cisco, obviously.
Yeah.
And a lot of security people also working with Cisco, but also working with Splunk. So then you start to see the big picture, right?
Well, the big picture is everything needs connectivity. So I want to go and do something like the birth of the internet. ARPANET starts off. It was connectivity at its purest. Two computers connected together to go and do that. The beginning of the internet and kind of the world we know it. What's really interesting on the state of the cost of downtime report was the biggest reasons for incidents wasn't things like AI, it wasn't things like ransomware attacks, it was misconfigurations of cybersecurity related type things and misconfiguration of IT infrastructure. Human factors come in. Yeah. Now I think about building a business, I need a connectivity, I need to go and be able to collaborate, and I need to then be able to observe everything that's happening, because it's inevitable we'll misconfigure things. Like, we will always be there. Even if AI is involved, someone will get it wrong. AI is never going to fix that.
Maybe especially when AI is involved, you never know.
But now we can go and see everything inside of that. We've got a chance to be able to spot things faster and be able to go and remediate it. And I think that's a big step change that we're starting to see.
But also especially with the integration between the two companies, right? Because then it all makes it's starting to make sense. I'm not entirely convinced yet that we will be here next year and say, well, all the IT ops and SecOps people are talking to each other now. But because it's a people thing, right? They're some of them are very protective of what they do, and they don't want anyone else to bother them with other stuff that they feel you don't have anything. It's not your.
Well, they're different languages, I think, and they see things differently. So I'm a technologist by background, but my role now tends to be almost like therapy. Talking to different teams on actually people change, management change, like transformation change, to bring in the technology to go and enable it. And I think technology change is really important. We're here at the annual conference for Splunk. We had Chuck Robbins on stage at the keynote. One of the things we are committed to, I think, is really important for a security point of view in the SOC is not having to say the answer is Splunk and Cisco. You have to have those things. Those are the only first-class citizens. From a Splunk perspective, we will make sure that if you use other products for, say, SOAR or anything else, they're still first-class citizens. If you've got Cisco, yes, it should be gold standard out the box, but it doesn't mean anything else is doing it as a detriment, because I don't believe that security operations, the IT operations, will ever have complete standardization from a single vendor. You're always going to be picking best of breed, and what you want is interoperability, which goes back to my first opening statement, which is actually about the data underneath it and how you go and leverage it.
I think that's a very, very good point. I think we need to dig into that a little bit more, because at the end of the day, it's a data, and like AI, it is a data game. Security is a data game as well, right? If you don't have the correct data management and other stuff in place, you're not going to be able to secure it properly.
Data management and use case prioritization. And looking
what do you mean by that?
So looking against your risk profile. There are so many new vulnerabilities coming out. Hopefully tools and kind of this class of product that Hypershield is going to just say, hey, you've got vulnerabilities and things out of patch, which is, I would say, a potential for someone to go and use a technique against you. But you've still got to look at, what is my actual threat? Do I get APTs as a risk against me? If I don't, let's not waste time on building those use cases. Let's focus on different types of risks. Waste time's maybe not the right word.
No, but I think
prioritize would be better.
I think that makes, because I've also heard lots of stuff about going on about risk-based security, right? And then that's been a buzzword for about 4 or 5 years, maybe already.
Well, it's almost like insurance, right? So companies traditionally would look at cybersecurity as an insurance policy. Why do you have insurance? You're mitigating against risk, because something will happen. It's inevitable, or might happen. You hope it doesn't happen, but you're going to protect yourself against it. So just like buying a car insurance policy, a house insurance policy, how much risk do you think you're going to have, and how much kind of investment do you want to go and make on it? I don't think that will ever change. What will change, though, is using that data. The more you can think about it from a data point of view, what else can I use for that? So you can actually think of cybersecurity as a business enabler rather than an insurance policy. That, I think, when you're talking about the future of SOC, that's one of the things that will start to change.
I think that makes sense, because then IT will also be more enthusiastic about security, right? If you say, well, if you're more secure, you're gonna, be happier, basically. Then I see that. Yeah. So just going back to the organizations, what do they need to do to actually prepare for this? Apart from obviously calling you and saying, I want Splunk, and no, just kidding.
They definitely can do that.
But
I won't. I'll definitely
you won't say
call.
no, probably. No.
No, I think one of the hardest things about, let's just take the role of a CISO, is I'm asking you to do two things. I'm saying, don't ever let this organization get breached. So what I'm really saying, I'm saying to you, you must have a steady run book. You must have consistency, almost like air traffic control. Really solid governance procedures, no deviation, get it right. At the same time, I'm asking the same individual, hey, the world is evolving so fast. I need you to be innovative, creative, break things, do things differently. And that's a really difficult thing. You would not normally ask a leader in any organization to do business as usual and innovation, but we're asking the CISO to do that. So I think actually what it really needs to think about is a separation of roles and being much clearer and cleaner inside of that organization on who's kind of doing the innovation side, who's doing the business as usual, how do you interoperate them, and how do you bring in networks, how do you bring in IT, SRE early into that process to add to the innovation, because they're innovating as well, they're thinking new things. And so starting to build that partnership up together and almost realize security is a team sport.
Then you need to set up some sort of a vertical kind of approach inside your organization to get this right.
Yeah, I think
across all levels and all domains of your company.
Yeah, I think classic organizations where that you have the big triangle and almost silos in there is never going to work. As we move to kind of multi-generational working, as we start to look at like what skills can we bring into the workplace, the organizations that are going to succeed are the ones that can go and bring natural teams together rather than having to force that through a management chain. And that, I think, especially from a security operations point of view, means leaders have to be more humble. and realize that what leaders are doing, they're connectors, they're enablers, they're creating free innovation spaces. They're not running a metric. They're not making sure someone's at their desk between certain hours. It's a very different shift. Yeah. That will enable the SOC of the future.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to pick up on again, because how do you measure? How do you measure success in this sense? I mean, ideally, you would consider security an investment, not necessarily an insurance, right?
Yep.
But then, if you invest, you need to have an ROI for somewhere, right? So how do you have the cost of downtime, obviously, that we talked about, but how do you? Are there any more tools or KPIs that you can actually? And you talked about shared KPIs as well that you can actually think of, or organizations should think of when they go about doing this.
So the two of us live in Europe. Well, I live in the UK, so it's always debatable depending on who you ask in the UK whether we live in Europe or not.
We tolerate you.
We tolerate you, but we like a good bit of regulation. And if you think about security operations, I'm going to use regulation as an example of where you can actually look at ROI. Regulation can be consuming to go and meet compliance mandates, do audits, those type of things. What we find is when people take a data approach to that, they're much faster. Like, hey, I don't fear an audit. Just tell me when you want to turn up because I've got everything ready. And just to kind of finish that point is when that gets right is actually working with IT to say, as you want to bring in change, let's understand it. Let me start to work with you on what we need for the regulation. So regulation never becomes a burden. It becomes a collaborative effort, and that starts to bring people together. Then I can actually go and say, how much by implementing security and kind of compliance reporting, have we been able to reduce that time to go and allow me to go and free up time to go and do something that's value add's not the right word because compliance is important, but maybe top line generating rather than kind of BAU. Yeah,
but also maybe go beyond go beyond compliance and all because I'm not. I know we need it. Compliance and ISO 27001 or whatever it is.
There's lots of them. Yeah,
lots of them. I know we need it, but it's also it also hinders kind of progress or insecurity as well because you tend to I've got the check mark, so fine. I don't do anything more. But do you see that if you take a data-driven approach, you will also go beyond compliance when it comes to security?
100%. I think actually, one of the things we've been talking about is resilience and digital resilience, a big theme of the conference this year. And a lot of that work for us started with work around DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act.
It's only for financial entities.
It's only financial services, but what it really started to set out, we're starting to see more and more pieces of legislation or consultations around resilience is you need to be secure, you need to think about your infrastructure, and you also need to provide a good consumer experience. So when I think about actually compliance reporting, regulatory reporting, and bringing data into that, what I'm building is the foundations to become resilient. Yeah. Because it's inevitable something's going wrong. The cost of downtime, we're going to misconfigure something. Yeah. AI will as well. It'll be fallible. But what that allows me to do is quickly understand what has gone wrong and builds confidence. The executive leaders don't drive transformation. No. They stand on stage, I'm guilty of this as well, and saying, here's my 2030 vision, here's my vision for the future, we'll pat ourselves on the back and job well done. No, it's actually people on the front line making micro decisions every single day that has a macro impact. Because I've seen this threat, do I block the firewall? Yes, no. Do I roll back this bit of software? Do I give people permission to do something? I've seen someone log in at the wrong time. These are trivial examples.
Well,
but
they happen a lot.
They happen a lot. But if every time I need to go and answer one of those, I'm having to escalate that decision because I don't have the right data and context, and I'm actually slowing down transformation. The more I can go and get data and context the front line for any use case, I'm building up momentum to go and build innovation, build that transformation, build trust and confidence. That's really the SOC of the future, and data and context the only way to go and drive. And
it's also, and obviously we shouldn't overlook the cost kind of aspect, right? Not necessarily the cost of downtime, but also the cost of living, for want of a better word, for companies, right? Yeah. Because that's what I quite like about these pipeline builders. That you say, well, we only move the data that we actually need to move, and not all the other stuff. Because that's very expensive if you have to do it continuously, right?
Yeah.
So you could think of an ROI in that sense as well. So if you do the SOC of the future correctly and you distribute your data management well and all that stuff, then you will actually be cheaper than it is now.
So I think this comes back to the concept of right time analytics.
Yeah.
What use case do I want to go and solve? What time frame do I need to solve it? Where is the data at the moment? And do I need to move that data? So, for a vendor to say, actually, you don't always have to go and store that data in Splunk is quite a big shift for us. And we spoke a lot this week around federated search. Some use cases, let's take proxy logs, DNS, those huge voluminous logs. Is there value in storing it? Yes, because I might need it. But do I need to store that in a fast online data store? Probably not. So store it in S3. And what we'll give from a Splunk persona point of view is you to have the ability to say, actually, I need to use that now. Write my search. It will go off to S3. Go and run that query. Is it going to be as fast? No. But does it need to be?
No.
And that's where you can start to think about, where do I need the data? Where do I want to move it? And how do I?
Yeah, that should be partly automated, right? Otherwise, you're not going to, or maybe not. I mean, I'm just assuming here, but or do you need to take stock of all your processes and all that things and saying, well, what's the right time to do this?
Well, ultimately, the vision would be, and this is why data management and DMX that we've been talking about this week is so important, because I can start to say, what feeds am I going in? I can also say what use cases are being utilized for those feeds. How often do I search them? Start to build that intelligence around. And one day, and I'm very sorry for what I'm about to say, but AI. But no, AI, we can have smarter systems to say, actually, we barely touch this data source. Let's automatically start just dumping that in S3. Actually, we use this a lot, but we typically only search 15 days worth of data. So let's send that to Splunk, and then let's roll that off after 15 days to long-term storage. To be much smarter around that data, and self-governing maybe is a better way of putting it.
Well, and just as a little disclaimer, I think you worked on the federated kind of stuff.
Yes,
for a long time,
we
right?
started this quite a while ago.
Yeah, you're quite keen on the subject, I think. Right?
I am, although I'm slightly the thing I got the patent for never made it to the light of day, but it was our early research. So.
But you have a patent that nobody uses.
But still, I can claim I'm an inventor, and when I'm older, I can say I was an inventor.
Maybe somebody will use it one day. I don't know. Maybe, or is it that dated that you can't use it anymore now?
It has some really interesting kind of like techniques and theories, because actually federated search is really complicated, because you've got to think about the user experience. You've got to think about the semantic mapping of the way Splunk would look at that data, or the application of that, and the end user. Which is why, from a community point of view, we put a lot of investment in the open source cybersecurity framework.
OSSF.
I can never get the acronyms, the letters in the right order. So thank you for saying it for me. Yeah. But the open cybersecurity framework is really important. So like Splunk, Amazon, Microsoft, Chronicle, a whole bunch of 14, 17 vendors as part of that. Because what I can now do, we can expose. This is the data that's available for security use cases, and actually make that semantic mapping much simpler, because that's where a lot of the complexity starts to go.
But that's on that's also potentially an issue, right? Because as a company or as a technologist, you think differently when it comes to the semantic mapping than you would as a user, right? So that's also on the vendors to actually interpret that right.
Yeah, it is. But I think we've seen a huge shift in the industry to be much more collaborative across vendors, and actually to recognize the more we work together, the better it is for our end customers. Then what is beholden at us is not about kind of controlling the data, it's providing the best experience to go and get that task in hand. I think it's no longer about ownership of data, having it in your data store. It's moving up a bit in the stack into who can provide the best analytics, the best user experience, the fastest time to value. And ultimately, I want someone to be able to have an experience where they don't think about using Splunk as a tool. They just interact with some software that's going to go and help them on the task in hand. Yeah. The more we can get away from having to learn a tool, the better it is for the security industry.
I think that's a nice segue in the sort of the final topic that I would like to... because we have about a couple of minutes left, so we should be able to.
We can be brief. I'll take a big breath in.
Well, you're a fast talker, so I think you can get a lot of words in. If I shut up now, but no, because you talked about so what you said just before I interrupted you was about the different components that you shouldn't be having to learn a tool anymore, or it's a Splunk tool. You should just be able to work with whatever you as Splunk or somebody else offers that. What does that mean for the interoperability of all the different components, for example, that Splunk has? Because I get the impression that they're all merging to a certain extent. So observability gets into security, gets into data management, and it's all one big
One of the beauties of Splunk is we're underpinned by that core data platform, and everything then sits on top of that. So we have a common underbelly for the product suites. Then what we went a long time, adding user-based analytics, SOAR. We've got ARI for like risk exposure, a whole bunch of different areas, and they kind of almost were standalone with some interoperability. What we've been doing over the last couple of years is unifying those experiences. And what becomes really important is then what we're announcing this week around the AI side. We power, lots of ML, lots of AI and like detections of things, but from a usability point of view, be able to use natural language to go and interact with the tool. Why is that important? Because then as an organization, I can put effort into training you about cybersecurity, not training you about a tool. And the more we can move to that, the more important. But and to maybe finish that point is when you find that cybersecurity incident, being able to hand that over to someone in the observability world to go and maybe do the remediation, the retrospective, those type of things, having that common language, the faster you can do that, the better.
So you still need the different pillars, so observability, security, these things, but for most users in organizations, it should just merge into one?
No, I think they're different mindsets. What we want is interoperability between teams, so they see each other as partners, different sides of the same coin, but not kind of like the same thing.
Yeah. And just a final question: Is it the SOC of the future for everybody? Can anyone use it? Because obviously, if you're talking distributed, then you also talk about regulated environments that may not be allowed to do this. Processing at the edge or whatever?
No, we can actually work with, we have lots of, take financial services, you might have deployment in Switzerland, one in Germany, one in the UK, one in Singapore, regulated environments. We can enable hybrid search between them. Is that quick to do? No, it's complex. You've got lots of regulation to go and work through and check. But I think SOC of the future is a concept of around taking a data-first approach. And so almost like the Ollie movement, it is a philosophy on how you want to approach that, and you mature through it rather than it's utopia that's really complicated to do. No, it's a starting point for you to go and build on.
That's a nice point to end this conversation, because as long as I always think as long as it doesn't become the next-gen firewall, which has been the next-gen firewall for about 15 years already.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
We don't want that. So
no, not at all.
This is not going to be that, right?
No.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed the conversation, and hope we meet again, maybe soon or
definitely will.
Later.
Thank you.
Never know.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of TechScene Talks on Tour. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. If you'd like more information, please feel free to visit techzine.eu, where we cover everything, everywhere. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us again on the next episode of TechScene Talks on Tour.